Welcome to Quebec, a predominantly French-speaking province. Based on the recent attacks in France, we've seen that debate about freedom of expression is all over the world. Well, now we are here to give you the perspective of the French Canadians. What Quebecers think about freedom of expression. Does it have a limit, or is it an absolute freedom and we are allowed to say whatever we want? So let's take on this journey about freedom of expression, the perspective of Quebec.
Mon Dieu, d'un point de vue canadien, la liberté d'expression n'est pas absolue. En France, tu as droit au blasphème. Donc, c'est pas le même système. Un des grands problèmes, d'après moi, de l'islam, c'est qu'il n'y a pas de leader incontesté mondial. Il faut qu'il y ait à un moment donné un leader chez les musulmans qui parle au nom des... Et prenez par exemple le président de la Turquie. Bon. Alors, le président de la Turquie, quand il parle au nom des Turcs. Ça ne veut pas dire que tous les musulmans vont le suivre. Ça prend quelqu'un qui va au-delà des pays. Ça prend une autorité morale supranationale chez les musulmans. C'est ça qui manque.
Je fais partie de la communauté musulmane Ahmadiyya. Et nous, dans notre communauté, nous avons un leader religieux que nous, on appelle calife.
Ah bon?
Voilà. Okay. Where do you draw the line between freedom of expression and hate speech?
Well, maybe last month, there was an interview with the Canadian Prime Minister, Trudeau. And in the interview, maybe you even all saw that he says the longest silence, something like 23 seconds that he was silent. This was about Donald Trump and his, racism in America. When they asked him that question, I thought that was very unique to watch him. 3 times he wanted to say something, but he pulled back. Before he told 2-3 times, because where they are, their voice is amplified. That's really important for a politician. The two, instead of criticizing the Trump or America, which there's so much to criticize them anyway, he said, how about if we look to ourselves as a Canadian society? How about if we look how we treat indigenous people? How about if we look at it as a self-reflective? I thought that was really, really powerful.
Look at this. We are in Montreal, Quebec. Qu'est-ce que la liberté d'expression? Est-ce que c'est une liberté absolue ou est-ce qu'il y a certaines limites? Est-ce qu'il y a certaines responsabilités?
Ben, il y a certainement une limite à la liberté d'expression. Entre autres, des propos xénophobes, des propos racistes. Ben, je pense qu'on a des législations pour limiter cette diffusion. Ah, ben écoutez, si on est un chrétien ici, bon, on a vu plusieurs caricatures sur les personnages saints de la religion catholique, sur les dirigeants de la religion catholique. Donc, les caricatures, tant qu'à moi, font partie de la liberté d'expression. Et c'est pas nécessairement blessant, tant qu'à moi, mon opinion. Offusquant ou méprisant, ça fait partie de notre culture, la caricature. C'est certain qu'il faut faire attention aux différentes communautés. Puis on le voit présentement avec l'utilisation du mot commençant par « N », je ne le dirai pas là. Alors,
moi, je crois pas à ça, la liberté absolue. C'est-à-dire qu'à un moment donné, les mots ont des conséquences, les choses qu'on dit ont des conséquences. À ce moment-là, ben, évidemment, il faut s'auto-censurer. Je veux dire, à quelque part, on a le droit de penser ce qu'on veut. Je veux dire, on n'est pas obligé. Votre religion, c'est privé, c'est pas dans la sphère publique, la religion, c'est privé. À ce moment-là, si moi, je trouve que c'est très drôle de montrer un Dieu qui, de cette façon-ci ou de cette façon-là,
So we've just, we've seen that people in Quebec have a different perspective about freedom of expression and also a different opinion about the cartoons. And for example, when we speak to them about freedom of expression, then they do agree that there is a limit. They do agree that words have consequences. But when it comes to cartoon, due to their cultural fact that in Christianity, cartoons have been made of God and Jesus as well. So it is difficult for them to understand this concept that cartoons can also be, offensive.
Yeah, I think that there's no question that there's a lot of influence still in Quebec from France, and the perspective of freedom of speech in France is quite different, I think, than in the rest of Canada. I think it's also a question of who has access to power in Quebec. Like, it's still quite white at the levels of the academy and of decision makers within politics. And not that it's much better in the rest of Canada, but there are people that have access to those platforms in a little bit of a different way. And so that for sure changes how people talk about freedom of expression and freedom of speech. An interesting place to live when you're an outsider. I'm an outsider in terms of my language, but obviously I can fit in until I speak. So folks who have different colored skin and folks who come from different parts of the world, you're often met with questions like, why did you end up here? Although I imagine that's not the case for people from France, for example, right? So
my friends, because of my friends of Strasbourg, and he is agreeing with the cartoons. He is, because he says that the critics should be allowed, and he speaks of autoderision. He says that in every religion, well, the people of faith should should admit humor, or should not take absolutely their croyance, their beliefs. They should not.
So is it cold? It's too cold.
What's the temperature like?
Temperature is like -30 for me right now.
So in Quebec, I think we also need to realize that there were a lot of fantastic things done by the Catholic Church, the educational system, the health system, but there was some abuse of power which led to the Quiet Revolution. So I think it's deep-rooted in many of our citizens' hearts and feelings that anything that is religious is not good because of that past. So I think the baby's been thrown out with the dirty water, as we say, and so there is resistance to all religion, essentially, by a good number of people. I don't want to say the majority, I don't have the statistics, but a lot of people have an aversion towards organized religion, and that's why we see that translating into what can seem like an anti-Muslim or Islamophobic sentiment.
So in Quebec, there is a gap in understanding religion as general. There's a fear about religion, and especially about the religion of Islam. But what we have to do in order to minimize that gap is to educate people through dialogue, through communication, by telling them the true character of our beloved Master Muhammad, may the peace and blessings of God be upon him. We need to tell them, why do we believe in him? Why do we follow him? Why do we love him so much? The only way to minimize that gap is to open the door of dialogue, the door of communication, and to let them know what a true Muslim stands for.
Make sure to like, comment below and subscribe for the latest uploads by the Review of Religions.